there's a curated list of jobs for you, which is, think about it as tiny little AI machines going out and cutting out all those pieces of those newspaper ads from various newspapers in the country and putting them all together, sorting them for your needs, and putting them in the right order so that you spend the least amount of time. The more data you can give the tool, the easier it is for the tool to be able to find the perfect match for you. AI is going to help recruiters be more efficient and definitely more productive, but making the human connections is really the critical element of hiring. Anxiety and fear about AI taking away all of the recruiter jobs is overstated, because I think that the human connection is still very important. AI won't take your job. It's the person next to you who's using AI that could take your job, right? Because essentially they're more productive.
You are the Vice President of Engineering at Indeed. Did you happen to find this job on Indeed? Everyone's not just talking about AI, but also going gaga over AI like it has always existed in our lives. And that is nothing new. When it comes to hiring, AI is not just transforming how companies hire, it's reshaping how the industry is learning, working, and growing. Welcome to Mint Techcetra. I'm your host, Nelson John. And today, we are decoding the future of how hiring looks in India, powered by AI, continuous learning, and new expectations on both sides of the job market. Joining me today is Madhu Kurup, Vice President of Engineering at Indeed, the world's #1 job site and a global leader in job matching. Madhu leads a team across matching recommendations, monetization, and sourcing, helping millions of people get hired with less effort using data and machine learning. In this conversation, Madhu reflects on the evolution of these technologies and what they mean for both sides of the hiring ecosystem, and how AI-driven guidance and decision-making may shape the future of work here in India. Madhu, welcome to Mint Techcetra. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here to talk about this very interesting subject.
Right. To start off, Madhu, we both can agree upon the fact that, we are living in an AI-driven world. Everything is, focused around AI innovations and all of that. Now, let alone the job market, I'm sure there's a lot of benefits of AI in the job market. If you were to apply for a job today, you are the vice president, but then if you were to apply for a job today, what is that one little human thing that you would still do to you'd sneak up in your resume or your profile so that it would stand out better than the others?
Lots of times, AIs are used to write things, AI used to screen things, but the most successful evolution is one in which there is the AI assisting and the human deciding.
Right.
And so, in my mind, eventually that resume is going to be seen by a human. And so, for me, what I think is most interesting is the nuance. And so what I would do is I would sneak in a human detail that is very unique to your lived experience,
Right.
which often is some kind of adversity that you've gone through that is unique to your experience. It might be that you had a first job and you had an extremely long commute, or
Right.
I don't know, I can tell you about my first job in Bangalore, where I was the first engineer for Yahoo, and I was simultaneously the catering in charge. I was the assistant for receiving invoice parcels and everything. And so it taught me a lot. So what I would do is I would sneak in some human detail that reflects a struggle that you went through.
Right.
Because no matter how good AIs get, they can't reflect that lived experience and that very intrinsic human nature of how you overcame adversity. And because in my mind, as a hiring manager, successes are easy. It's kind of how you learn from adversity and how you grow and how you bounce back up.
Right.
That is usually much more important element for me. And so I would put in something, even if you use AI to tweak your resume, it's totally okay. Because in my mind, like if you're using spell check before, using AI to sort of write your resume is not anything dramatically different.
Sure.
But I would put in a very specific human detail of something you overcame, something that was a challenge, or something that makes your experience unique.
Right. And have you experienced this by any candidate, at Indeed? doing this,
in terms of putting
that human
unique
touch
details.
to.
Yeah, many ways I've seen that. Sometimes it is they'll talk about a passion that's not directly related, right? I once saw someone put in a chess rating on chess.com,
Oh, okay.
right? And I kind of play recreationally. And so I kind of part of the conversation wandered somewhere else, right? And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, a huge story. You don't have to write an essay, but it could be a lead-in to an engaging human conversation. Because when you connect at a human level,
Right.
that's what really great hiring is all about.
True, true. So, I came across, this specific term, that as Indeed being a AI-powered job matching portal, like kind of,
That's right.
So, could you, walk me through, some specific places where AI has significantly helped a candidate's journey here in India?
Right.
So, I probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, the way that you would think about it is, for a long time, the hiring market, or the market even for job seekers, right, was you went in and you searched. And if you think about it, search is also a form of matching. I just want to be very clear.
Right.
But it's one in which humans have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. My favorite anecdote about this is, like, if you see any older movies, right, whenever there is some tragic heroine or tragic hero that needs to find a job, they go get the newspaper, and then they go and they circle like three things, and then they're like, oh, we'll try with this one, right?
Right.
That was kind of the old way of searching.
Right.
But what we do, for example, right now, and by the way, that also has a lot of, I just want to be super clear, that also has ML. We've been using that kind of ML for 20 years at Indeed to power searches. But the new way that we do, matching, is when you come to the app and you open up the app,
Right.
on the homepage, there's a curated list of jobs for you.
Oh, okay.
Which is, think about it as tiny little AI machines going out and cutting out all those pieces of those newspaper ads from various newspapers in the country,
Right.
and putting them all together, sorting them for your needs, and putting them in the right order so that you spend the least amount of time, right? And so that's why we say we've moved from search to a matching, universe, because now we do a lot of the hard work for you, so that it's easier for the job seeker to find what they're looking for.
So also, with the aspect of using AI in the jobs ecosystem, have you had any interesting encounters, where AI has found a match and probably the humans have missed that out?
Yeah, I've had examples of places where machine learning and AI have helped find things that otherwise humans would not have found.
Right.
And so, for example, there are some tools like there's a tool called Match Candidates that's available in premium, where if you give us the job description, we will look for people for you.
Right.
And then that example, we will look for all the synonyms without you having to do that work. So here's an example of where machine learning can help you find candidates that you would not have otherwise known about.
So, so with what I can understand is that, we might have the technology that is there to, make it easy to, find matches and all that. But I believe there is still an element of human touch to that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the way that I'd like to describe it is, the ideal for me is AI assists and the human decides. That's the kind of thing where the AI can give you options, but
Right.
you have to decide. So I think hiring is a very intrinsically human thing that's always going to be there. And I think the human deciding element is very critical and should never be underestimated or never be sort of underplayed.
That's a very important point that you've mentioned out there. So moving on, for any job seekers probably watching this episode, what is that one advice that you would probably give them so that they maximize their reach, they maximize their match, and be noticed on the Indeed systems?
Yeah. First of all, I would say is, if they aren't on Indeed, create their account. Second, upload the resume, and then there's another element of making their resume available for employers. That's an important thing, because if you don't, then it's hard. But there are other things as well you can do. Is on the homepage and other places, there are places where you can put your preferences in.
Right.
You can put your preferences with respect to location, with respect to salary. The more data you can give the tool,
Right.
the easier it is for the tool to be able to find the perfect match for you.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I would say spend some time customizing the profile.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes people think about, I just want to click, 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 and get to the next stage.
That's right. Yeah.
But you got to understand that those data elements are actually really important for helping us help you,
Right.
right? So if you're a job seeker and you're looking for the way to maximize your effectiveness, spend time on your profile, get as much profile completion as you can get whatever certifications you have in whatever you think is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
The more data you add, the better we will be able to match.
Right, right. So, I mean, building on, all of these topics that we spoke so far, and we need to address the elephant in the room, the fear of losing jobs to AI. And that's a real fear, and that's debated vastly on the internet most of these days, like that. So, but with what I understand from the conversation with you is, it's the opposite. I mean, what is the role of a human recruiter in this new era of AI-powered hiring ecosystem then?
Yeah, there's a paradox that says somewhere where if you make some things easier, you tend to do more of it. I forget the name of the paradox, but it's there. What I think is actually going to happen here is AI is going to take a lot of the manual and tedious tasks out of the way.
Right.
But as I said before, I think the perfect blend is when AI assists and humans decide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in that world, AI is going to help recruiters be more efficient
Mm-hmm.
and definitely more productive. But making the human connections is really the critical element of hiring. And so I think that the anxiety and fear about AI taking away all of the recruiter jobs is overstated,
All right. Mm-hmm.
because I think that the human connection is still very important.
True. So you're saying it's a combination of AI and human touch. That's the way forward. Like,
That's what I strongly
so
believe.
you either embrace AI or get left behind, something like that.
So there's a quote that I heard first from our chief economist, but I don't know what the origin of the quote was. It's AI won't take your job. It's the person next to you who's using AI that could take your job, right?
Right.
Because essentially they're more productive.
Absolutely.
I'll give you an example, right? So if you look at the new products that we've launched, like Career Scout for job seekers or Talent Scout for employers, these are agents that are going to be working on your behalf,
Right.
right? And you may say, hey, wait a minute, that's another example of AI coming in the process. But I'll give you equivalent, right? Maybe 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, not everyone had an email account.
True. That's correct.
Right?
That's true. Yeah.
But an email account makes it so much easier for you to do so many things.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I'm expecting agents to be that kind of utility where the agent will do a lot of the hard work for you, but you still need to make the decisions.
Right.
Because if you think about it, right, if you're trying to find a house in Bangalore to rent, which is a super hard problem, if you had a beautiful agent that you could just say, hey, here are my requirements, go find me 7 houses, right? And then you only had the hard task of deciding which is the perfect one. You'd love that world.
Absolutely.
Everyone would love that world, right?
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with jobs. If you can specify all your requirements and the agent goes, and in this case, Career Scout, as it gets launched appropriately, goes and does all the work in the background. You're sleeping, you're on vacation, you're having a good time. It's still doing work for you, right?
That's true.
And when you come back online and you check, and it tells you, hey, I have these 7 jobs that are sorted in priority. Decide which one you want to pursue. You're in business, right? So I think that that world of agents doing work for you and agents working quietly and allowing you to decide is going to be the way that the world works.
So you mentioned about Career Scout and Talent Scout. So I mean, like, for our viewers who do not know what that is, could you just probably give them a more clear example? Like, is it a part of their profile that they build on?
Yeah. So for example, Career Scout and Talent Scout were launched in the US, I believe last September, as part of our US FutureWorks event. Career Scout is a tool that sits and is accessible from the app for job seekers.
All right.
And it is a conversational style process where you can engage with the scout, and you can ask it questions, you can ask it to find matches, you can give it updates, you can give it feedback about kind of job ranges and things of that sort. And so it's a tool that basically sits with you and allows you to converse with it almost like you're conversing with a human.
Oh, wow.
And then it'll take away that material and allow us to basically help you find better jobs.
Right.
Right. On the employer side, the Talent Scout is a tool that basically looks to do things like it helps you summarize, it helps you evaluate various kinds of particular conditions that you want to apply. It also there's going to be additional features that are going to be launched that will help you optimize how you can run your hiring operation on Indeed. Right. So think about it again. It's basically like having a really powerful assistant that you can converse with that does a lot of work for you and makes your life easier. That's what I would say both of those scouts are.
Scout. So I mean, so if I create a profile on Indeed, so is this application, this agent already enabled on my profile?
In some ways, you create your profile, and then your profile is one element of a conversation with Career Scout.
All right. Okay.
Right. And so it's a UX. It's an experience on the app. You can have a conversation with it in the app, and then it'll respond back to you. It'll do work on your behalf. You can keep giving it more and more as you come across more stuff. You can, for example, like if you wanted to, there are a lot of people who use it as a career, investigator. Right. So, for example, there's a very famous case where someone was unsure that they wanted to be in the creative arts, but they wanted a job, and so they didn't realize that there were jobs like executive assistant in a film house, right? Which allows them to stay in the creative arts, but fits what they had done in their academic career so far, right? So there are some parts of the tooling that allow you to sort of do career pathing and say, with my current skills, what are alternative roles I can get off, or what are other roles I have not thought about that I can be qualified for, right? So there are those kinds of options too. There are other things. It'll also help you make a resume. If you've never made a resume, it'll help you make a resume. It'll also help you find jobs, right? So there's all kinds of things like that.
So it's like more of a mentor, like you could just probably
that's why we call it Career Scout. It's kind of like a mentor. That's a way of thinking about it. Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing like that. So I just want to know, how do you imagine AI disrupting the Indian job market in the coming years? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're in a very interesting position. So if you look at the various demographic curves of various countries, right? And particularly the way that the curve is set up is it's older people on top and younger people on the bottom. Some countries are an inverted pyramid, right? With a lot of older people, very few younger people. Yeah. Some countries are the other way around, where there's a lot of younger people, very few older people. True. India is kind of unique. So we have a very growing population that is looking for work, and therefore, in some way, we're in a dynamic sort of environment. We're also in an environment where we've had a lot of focus on services, and we've had a lot of focus and growth on things that have taken advantage of our ability. And a lot of Indians are very comfortable with English, which soon is turning into the language of the world, right? And so if you think about some of the BPO and some of the other things have taken advantage of sort of our historical education elements, right? So I'm thinking from an India perspective, given the young population, given the economy, given the growth, we're in for a very interesting period. Particularly, for example, even for AI, there are a bunch of places where AI training has had sort of pretty significant employment opportunity, particularly in rural areas, right? Because some of these things are very remote friendly. They don't need you to be, like if you're in the process of labeling something, right? You don't need to be particularly in a big city. You could be in some other city, right? If you're in the universe of writing software, you could be living, and I don't like these terms, but in a tier 3 city, right? And as long as you have great internet, you're equivalent to a software engineer anywhere else in the world, right? And so from that perspective, I think India has some unique advantages that I think will be very helpful as the AI wave gets stronger.
No, like you mentioned a really important point. India is at that cusp of that where we have the talent is ready to jump into the job market. Like, so I was just reading a report recently. I think in MIT had published a report of the impact of AI and the jobs in 2026. They also mentioned about how India and the rest of the world, like so Japan has a median age of, say, about working age was about 50 years, and China is at 40, and India is at 28. So we have a whole lot of crowd that is there, a population that wants to go to work. So as Indeed, so how do you look at this? How do you capitalize on this, and how do you prepare a workforce for this?
Yeah, I think there is elements on both sides, both on the job seeker side and on the employer
Right.
side as well. I was thinking about an example. Like, I had a friend of mine who was obsessed with IIT, and he would study this Russian math book called Irudov.
Okay.
Right? It was his favorite thing, right? And he would obsess about it. And he was convinced that anyone who studied Irudov really well would be doing well in the IIT exams, right? All the LLMs have read the Irudov book. They've not just read that book; they've read all the Russian math books there are, right? So, in some sense, today, as someone who didn't spend a lot of time with that book, I can go to an AI and it can be really helpful to me. So in my mind, what you did or what you officially obtained is not as important as what you're able to achieve with the tools you have, right? And so from an employer perspective, I think getting more focused on what's been delivered and what's been achieved and what's actually been been done, that's important. Right. And also from the job seeker side, now let's just go change the perspective. I think it's really important to be adopting and using tools. And so again, as job seekers, I would urge everyone to say, look at the AI tools, take as much advantage of them as possible, learn how to be really good with them, because if that is what you become excellent at, then employers are going to be able to say, look, I doesn't matter what the person's degree was, or like you could have been doing, accounting, but you might have had a inherent skill for, I don't know, high-end graphics design. Yeah. And so I would urge people to basically look at tools as ways to expand their creativity and be flexible about it.
True. So also what you mentioned is really apt. There's so much of content that is being out there. So what happens is a lot of times when people come on, per se, maybe on Indie, we have this rise in blank searches. So what do you understand of the mindset of today's workforce with that?
Yeah, so blank searches are a particular source of interest for me because they represent a conundrum in a very interesting way. Because one way to think about a blank search is a job seeker saying, I don't know what I'm looking for, right? And that is a very legitimate thing, which is, I don't know what are all the roles that can be applicable for me, right? Which is, maybe I can be a software engineer 1, maybe I can be a software engineer 2. That's kind of the naive way of thinking about it. Maybe it's an expression of, I don't know what career I want, right? Maybe it's another element of, I think we've all got trained with AI to kind of expect systems to do work for us. Like, let me ask you a question. Like, when you open up YouTube, like, there was a time, I remember maybe 5 years ago, when I would go to YouTube with a very specific idea. And I would type for a very specific search.
Right.
And I would find a specific video, watch it, and go away. Now, when I go to YouTube, I just open the app, and I expect that something interesting for me is there, right? So in my mind, blank searches are perhaps now an expectation change from the job seeker that you will find the right thing for me, and you will show me the right thing, and I don't need to do work.
Right.
But it's kind of hard because when we do some of our internal research, there is a group that basically says, I just want a job.
Something
I don't care. Yeah. I don't care what job it is. I just want a job. There's that group, right? There's a group that says, tell me what my options are. And this is where things like Career Scout can really help. Because if you're looking for career options, Career Scout can really sort of guide you there. But I would agree, blank searches are a very interesting problem. And I don't like trying to say there are simple causes is a dangerous business. There's complicated causes, but some of it is even expectation change.
Expectation change. So you also mentioned earlier in our conversation, so you have these prompts that are up there. So is this the reason why you have these prompts, like, suggesting, like, what to look up for? Like
suggested searches are again, actually a machine learning technique, an old machine learning technique, actually called collaborative filtering, where we basically say that, people who search for this also search for that.
All right.
Right? It's again a way for us to use machine learning to make your task easier.
Easier,
right? So it's just
that means it has a history of what we've searched for. Like, Not just in the platform, anywhere else outside?
No,
Like,
no,
how does it?
just
On the
in
platform
the
itself.
platform. Yeah, and also thousands of other people like you.
Right,
Right?
right. So,
So
probably what they might have searched
yeah,
for.
yeah,
Like,
and what they might have found success with.
all right, on to our final question for this episode is, I mean, it's a difficult one. You are the vice president of engineering at Indeed. Did you happen to find this job on Indeed?
First, I joined Indeed 5 years ago, and at that time, uh, my boss had my eventual boss at that time found me and had a conversation with me, and my role wasn't even defined.
Okay.
Right. So he originally was looking for me with one role in mind, and as the conversation progressed, he realized that I was actually a much better fit for a different thing that didn't even exist. So for all those people who are concerned about AI, this is the perfect, actually, I think, I don't know if you intended this, but it's a perfect example of why humans are required in the loop. Because only a human can recognize that, yes, this is an interesting person to have in the company, but there isn't a role yet. And so in some sense, the manager there kind of came back to me and said, look, we had originally planned to talk to you about role X, but I think role Y is actually much more interesting, and I think you'll be fantastic at role Y. So do you want to do that? So no, my role wasn't on Indeed because it wasn't even, it was in someone's mind only, right?
Everyone's on Indeed, and my job's also on Indeed, I suppose. All right, so I mean, we're at the end of our episode today. Madhu, we've had a great conversation, great insights into the job and the recruitment ecospace that, that we're working today in India with. As Madhu shared with us, AI won't replace people. It will empower them, elevate recruiters into strategic advisors, guide job seekers with more confidence, and widen access to talent we've overlooked for far too long. Madhu, thank you so much for joining us today on Mint Techcetra. It was a pleasure conversing with you.
It was a really good conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to Mint Techcetra. I'm your host, Nelson John. Join us next time as we continue to unpack the technologies shaping India's digital future.